Nancy Drew, The Secret of the Old Clock by Carolyn Keene. Read for you by Brandon Reese Taylor on the Jessie Millette YouTube channel. Chapter 7. The Angry Dog. With the instinct of a detective who dared not miss a clue, Nancy deliberately moved closer to the bench on which the Topham girls were seated. If there should be another will, I'm afraid we'd be out of luck. The words in Ada Topham's nasal voice came clearly to Nancy. Isabel's reply was in so low a tone that the young sleuth could just manage to catch the words, Well, I, for one, don't believe Josiah ever made a later will. She gave a low laugh. Mother watched him like a hawk. Or thought she did, Isabel retorted. The old man got out of her clutches several times, don't forget. Yes, and that's what's worse. I'm sure Nancy Drew thinks he made a later will. That's why she's taking such an interest in those Hoover girls. I actually saw them go into Mr. Drew's office yesterday, and it wasn't to deliver eggs. If Nancy gets her father interested, he might dig up another will. Oh, and I hate that interfering girl. At this, Nancy could barely refrain from laughing. So the Tophams were concerned about the existence of a second will. With bated breath, she listened further. You're such a worry-wart, Ada. You can trust Dad and Mother to take care of things, no matter what happens, Isabel commented dryly. They won't let that pile of money get away from us. It's ours by right, anyhow. You've got something there, Ada conceded. We should have old Josiah's money after supporting and putting up with him for 3 years. That was pretty clever of Mother, never accepting any board money from Josiah Crowley. The conversation ended as Isabel and Ada arose from the bench and walked away. Nancy waited until they were out of sight, then emerged from her hiding place. Seating herself on the bench vacated by the Topham sisters, Nancy mulled over the remarks she had just overheard. There's no doubt in my mind that if there is a later will, the Tophams haven't destroyed it. How thrilling! But where could it be? Nancy realised that to find it was a real challenge, and I'd better hurry up before the Tophams stumble on it. For another 10 minutes, Nancy sat lost in thought, sifting all the facts she had gleaned so far. There must be some clue I've overlooked, she told herself. Suddenly, with a cry of delight, she sprang to her feet. Why didn't I think of that before? The Hoover girls and the Turners aren't the only ones who should have figured in this will. There are other relatives of Mr. Crowley who have filed a claim. I wonder who they are. If I could only talk with them, I might pick up a clue. Immediately, Nancy set off for her father's office. He was engaged in an important conference when she arrived, and she had to wait 10 minutes before being admitted to the inner office. Now what? Mr. Drew asked, smiling, as she burst in upon him. Have you solved the mystery, or is your purse in need of a little change? Nancy's cheeks were flushed and her eyes danced with excitement. Don't tease me, Dad, she protested. I need some information. At your service, Nancy. The young sleuth poured out the story of the Topham sisters' earlier conversation in the park and told him of her own conclusions. Mr. Drew listened with interest until she had finished. Excellent deducing, he praised his daughter. I'm afraid, though, I can't help you obtain the relatives' names. I don't know any of them. Nancy looked disappointed. Oh dear, she sighed. And I'm so anxious to find out right away. If I delay even a single day, the Tophams may locate the other will and destroy it. The next instant her face brightened. I know, I'll drive out and see the Turner sisters. They might be able to tell me who the other relatives are. Nancy arose and headed for the door. Just a minute, said the lawyer. I wonder if you realise just what you are getting into, Nancy. What do you mean? Only this, detective work isn't always the safest occupation in which to engage. I happen to know that Richard Topham is an unpleasant man when crossed. If you do find out anything which may frustrate him, the entire Topham family could make things extremely difficult for you. I'm not afraid of them, Dad. Good, Mr. Drew exclaimed. I was hoping you would say that. I'm glad you have the courage of your convictions. I'm glad you have the courage of your convictions, but I didn't want you to march off into battle without a knowledge of what you might be up against. Battle? Yes, the Tophams won't give up the fortune without a bitter struggle. However, if they attempt to make serious trouble, I promise to deal with them myself. And if I do find the will, I'll take the matter into court. Oh, thank you. There's no one like you in all the world. After leaving her father's office, Nancy went directly home to get her car. When she told Hannah Gruen her plans, the housekeeper warned, "Don't become too deeply involved in this matter, dear. In your zeal to help other people, you may forget to be on your guard." "I promise to be as careful as a pussycat walking up a slippery roof," Nancy assured the housekeeper with a grin, and left the house. Quickly backing her car from the garage, she set off in the direction of the Turner home. The miles seemed to melt away as Nancy's thoughts raced from one idea to another. Before the young sleuth knew it, she had reached the house. "Hi, Judy," she called to the little girl, who was playing in the yard with a midget badminton set. The child looked very cunning in a pink play suit. The hand-embroidered teddy bears on it were surely the work of her loving aunts. "Hi, Nancy. I'm glad you came. Now I'll have someone to play with," Judy said, running up to the visitor. Obligingly, Nancy took a racket and batted the feathered shuttlecock toward the child. "Hit the birdie," she called. Judy missed, but picked up the shuttlecock and whammed it nicely across the net. Nancy hit it back, and this time the little girl caught the birdie on her racket and sent it over. The game went on for several minutes, with Judy crying out in delight. "You're the bestest batter I've ever played with, Nancy," she declared. After 10 minutes of play, Nancy said, "Let's go into the house now, Judy. I want to talk to your aunties." Judy skipped ahead and announced her new playmate's arrival. "Hello, Nancy," the women said as she entered the living room. "We were watching the game from the window," said Mary Turner. "This is a real thrill for Judy. Edna and I are very poor at hitting the birdie." "It was lots of fun," Nancy replied. "I'm glad to see you all again." She now asked whether the police had located the thieves who had taken the silver heirlooms from the house. "Not yet," Mary answered, "and what's worse, we found that several other pieces had been taken too." "What a shame," Nancy exclaimed, "but I'm sure the stolen articles will be found soon." Then she added, "I came here on a particular mission." "Yes?" "Your story about Mr. Josiah Crowley intrigued me. Then, the other day, I met two girls, Grace and Alison Hoover, who told me of a similar promise from him regarding his will." "How amazing!" Edna Turner exclaimed. "I heard Josiah mention the Hoover girls and Alison's beautiful voice. Dad and I have become very much interested in the case, and are inclined to agree with you and the Hoover girls that Mr. Crowley may have written another will shortly before his death and hidden it in some place." "Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if such a will could be found?" Mary exclaimed. "It might mean all the difference in the world to Judy's future." "What I want to do," Nancy went on, "is talk to as many of Mr. Crowley's relatives as I can. Some place I may pick up a clue to where a more recent will is hidden. Tell me, do any of his other relatives live around here?" "Yes, 3 that I can think of," Edna answered. She went on to say that 2 cousins, who had never married, lived on a farm just outside Titusville. Their names are Fred and William Matthews. Suddenly the Turner sisters blushed a deep pink. They glanced at each other, then back at Nancy. Finally, Edna said, "Many years ago, Fred proposed to Mary and William to me, and we came near accepting. But just at that time, we had the great tragedy in the family and took Judy's mother to rear, so we decided not to marry." An embarrassing pause was broken by Judy. "Some day my aunties are going to give me one of my mother's dollies, Nancy. Isn't that nice?" "It certainly is," Nancy agreed, "and you must be sure to show it to me." Then she asked the sisters, "What relation are the Matthews to Mr. Crowley?" "First cousins on his mother's side." "Do you think they would mind me asking them some questions, even though I'm a stranger?" "Not at all," Mary replied. "They're very fine gentlemen." And tell them Mary and I sent you," Edna added. How far is Titusville from here? Nancy inquired. Oh, not more than 5 miles on Route 10A. You could drive there in a few minutes. It's on the way to Masonville. Nancy, won't you stay and have lunch with us? Eager to continue her work, the young sleuth was about to refuse, but Judy put in an invitation also. Please, oh please, Nancy. And while my aunties are fixing it, you and I can play badminton again. All right, Nancy agreed, and thank you very much. It was nearly 2 o'clock when she finally was ready to depart. Oh, Mary, said Edna suddenly, we forgot to tell Nancy about Josiah's wife's cousin, Mrs. Abby Rowan. She'd be apt to know more about the will than anyone else. That's right, you really should call on her, Nancy. She took care of Josiah one time when he was sick, and he thought the world of her. He often declared he intended to leave her something. She's a widow and has very little. Even a few $1,000 would mean a lot to her, Edna added. Abby must be over 80 years old, and growing forgetful. She has no children, and there's no one to look after her. Where shall I find Mrs. Rowan? Nancy asked, hoping it was not far away. Abby lives on the Westlake Road, Edna responded. It's a good many miles from here. Then I shan't have time to go there today, the young sleuth said. But I'll surely see her as soon as I can. And now I must be going. Nancy thanked the Turners and said goodbye, but before she could leave, Judy insisted upon showing her how she could jump rope and do all kinds of dancing steps with a hoop on the lawn. Judy entertains us all the time, Mary remarked. We believe she's very talented. Nancy thought so too, and she drove off. She again hoped that money would come available for a very special education for Judy. After Nancy had gone 5 miles along the designated route, she began to watch the mailboxes. Soon she noticed one which bore the name Matthews. The farmhouse stood back a distance from the road, and had a wide sweep of lawn in front of it. Near the house a man was riding a small tractor, mowing the grass. Nancy drove down the narrow lane which led into the grounds, and stopped opposite the spot where the man was working. The man's back was toward her, and he apparently had not heard the car above the noise of the tractor, so she waited. Looking toward the house, Nancy suddenly saw a sight that appalled her. Wedged between 2 stones of a broken wall was a police dog puppy whining pitifully. Nancy dashed forward and released the little animal. As it continued to whimper, she cuddled the pup in her arms and began to examine its paws. Why, you poor thing, Nancy said, seeing a tear in the flesh of one hind leg. This must be taken care of right away. She decided to carry the puppy over to the man on the mower. As Nancy walked across the lane, though, she suddenly heard an angry growl near her. Looking back, she saw a huge police dog, evidently the pup's mother, bounding toward her. It's all right, Nancy called soothingly to the dog. I'm not going to take your baby away. She took 2 more strides, but got no farther. With a fierce snarl, the dog leaped on Nancy, knocking her flat.